So welcome to this latest in the ChamberTalk podcast series discussing the results from the latest quarterly economic survey and what this tells us about business confidence in this region and the wider UK. I'm Russell Borthwick, Chief Executive at the Chamber, and with me today is Findlay Anderson, Partner and Head of Corporate at our report sponsor, Gilson Gray. Welcome, Findlay. So this quarter three survey ran from mid-August into September, so making it the sort of first chance for businesses to record their performance, their views and their confidence levels since the new UK government took office at the start of July. Over 5,000 companies took part nationally and about 120 in this region, which gives us a pretty strong and representative sample from which to compare regional with national data. So I'm going to ask you for your initial reactions to it. But first, tell us a little bit about Gilson Gray and why you're involved in the QES.
Sure. Delighted to be here. Thank you, Russell, for having us. Gilson Gray has been over the last 10 years the fastest growing law firm in Scotland and in the UK. We're across the main cities in Scotland and now in the last couple of years, two offices in England with our London office just announced last week. So rapidly growing, very much servicing multiple sectors across the UK, and we'll come to that in a minute. And so, we're 2 or so years in Aberdeen with our office. Very much wanted to partner with the Chamber. We're similar to our UK approach. We're servicing multiple sectors here. Yes, energy is a significant sector, but there are many different sectors here, and we wanted to really look at how they turn up with you and how we can support in that.
Great. And just what headline level, what's your take on the Q3 report?
Yeah, and interesting your point about the last 3 months are timed well for, I guess, an initial sense of business feel following the new government, and we just had the 100 days come to an end, the first 100 days moving into the second 100 days. So yeah, it's perfect timing. And I would say we've got a budget coming round, and we're all aware of that. There's a lot of nervousness, I would say, in this particular region around that. It's well documented in terms of, particularly on the taxation side, the potential concerns, and we can come to that later. I would say across the sector, this region, as we have seen over the quarters, this is now 5 quarters we've been doing this, and I would say in this region we've seen the region outperform the UK many times. Agreed. It's a powerhouse. The dominant sector feeds other sectors, and so there are any number of sectors that actually do very well here, both in terms of domestic and in particular international in terms of exports. At the same time, we have continued to see a bit of a drop-off in confidence, increasing uncertainty about what the future might look like over the next 12 months, 3 months, etc. And so we see that continuing in this report in various ways.
Yeah, I think I would probably characterise it as a bit of an economy in a holding pattern, I think, with companies maybe sitting on the hands a bit, waiting to see what the real impact of new government policy will be. As you said, what we hear from the Chancellor on the 30th of October.
And I guess I'd say, sectorally, beyond energy, and we can talk a fair bit about energy, but beyond that, I would say actually even just recently, the last quarters, we've seen the healthcare industry, particularly private healthcare. That's an area that has, unfortunately, given the situation with the NHS, it's an area that investment has flowed into, and we are seeing private healthcare businesses look to grow, look to consolidate, etc. And so we are still seeing deals being done there. They need to find the funding, they need to find the right opportunities. But that, certainly across Scotland, we're seeing that, which is encouraging. Other areas, digital for business, we're acting for multiple businesses who are alive in that area, looking for funding, looking for the right regulatory basis to bring developments to play, and that's actually across Scotland. We're seeing that, but the big thing that's coming out of this is government, needs to find that balance between taxing and incentivising business. And what we've seen in this region in particular over the years is when government finds that balance, business will run fast.
Yeah, and I think that's been a big theme of the chamber.
Yeah.
Don't over-regulate,
Yes.
create the conditions, let business take the lead.
Yes.
It's what business does best. And
Yes.
your previous comments interesting, the private sector stepping into, sadly, a little bit of a public sector failure with the NHS.
Yes.
But the private sector looks to try and make a contribution there. And
Yes.
you talk about some of the other deals being done, but actually those investors need confidence that they can see a return on that investment.
Absolutely.
And I guess maybe a little bit of uncertainty still about
Yes.
whether that's the case. It's interesting because we talked about 120 sample size from northeast businesses. Less than a fifth of those were from companies in the energy sector. So it's apparent that we are facing huge uncertainties around the future of oil and gas at the moment, but it's very obvious from this data set that that's starting to have a knock-on effect in the confidence of the wider extended supply chains which exist in the northeast economy. Have you got any other examples of what you're seeing or hearing from clients or in the work that Gilson Gray does, which sort of backs that up?
Yeah, and some of these are very, very local issues which are well expounded upon over the past months and quarters. There's in the planning world, in our city centre, there's real impact, and we don't need to go into that so much here. I would say, and it comes out in this report later on, nearer the end of the report, when companies have reported on those factors that are bringing financial pressures on their performance. And the two that jump out of me for locally are taxation and business rates.
Yeah.
And they are the two leading factors, and that is across sectors, particularly the business rates one. It's an area that a solution needs to be found. It's not an easy solution. No one would suggest that's the case, but we see that impacting businesses, both in terms of their location, do they choose city centre or do they go elsewhere, etc., and also their performance. And so, and the taxation is a whole other area that we could spend time talking about.
I'm going to spend a little bit more time talking about it, if that's okay, because there's not even a small difference between the national result and the regional result here. There's about a percentage point greater risk factor is in terms of a growth barrier is cited as being taxation. Now that could be corporate tax, particularly we've talked about windfall taxes, which will have impact beyond just oil and gas if they continue, but also personal income tax levels in Scotland. We're hearing increasingly that those are a barrier to attracting and retaining the best people to Scotland. Yes. And then of course we've got that other part which is in business rates. Some sectors are treated much more favourably south of the border than they are in Scotland, which is actually creating a competitive disadvantage here against elsewhere. So it certainly does appear that we have specific challenges north of the border and in this region, which perhaps aren't true for other parts of the UK. Would you go along with that?
Yeah, I mean, certainly at the national level, the income tax differential just seems to be almost a shot in the foot. We hear of clients in the Central Belt in particular talking about moving 50 mil south, 100 mil south, to change the dynamic for themselves, because they can, because they're mobile businesses. Equally may well choose similarly based on lots of different factors. On capital gains tax, yes, the government is in a sense trying to calm down the fears, but we are seeing businesses looking at, well, do we need to get our deals over the line now? And so we're seeing a little bit of a fillip on deals just now. We've got 3 weeks to go, and so that's creating some pressure. But a lot of businesses are just saying we're going to sit tight because there's so much uncertainty around on the taxation side. The EPL, it's obviously, for good reason, discussed at length with regard to oil and gas in particular. Yeah. But what we are seeing, and I think the uncertainty that the North East region has seen around government policies impacting the oil and gas sector, impacts across sectors. It impacts across the region, and I think we've seen that, and we'll come to that as we look at the different metrics. It's not just in the quarter, it's over the last 6 quarters, actually, we've seen this
That's
onward decline of certainly businesses at that top end saying, yes, we're seeing increase, we're seeing confidence, etc. That's been on the wane for the last year and a half to 2 years, and that equates to that period where there's been a significant amount of uncertainty. And that's, as you say, 120 businesses, 20% of them from the oil and gas and the energy sector. And so what we're seeing is businesses across sectors saying there's significant uncertainty here, and it's impacting our confidence in the growth area.
Yeah, and of course, in a different survey, the Energy Transition Survey, which the results will be published in a few weeks' time, the confidence indicators in the future of the North Sea are at negative levels never seen before. Even during the financial crisis, the oil price crash, the pandemic, we're way below that. So clearly confidence is lacking. Just to close off this little bit then, as the old HMRC TV commercial tried to say, tax doesn't need to be taxing, but it feels right now that it probably is on business, and specifically in this region. So we're seeing, for example, that future recruitment intention among regional businesses is the lowest since Q1 2021, and previously this region has actually shown a higher propensity to look to recruit. Is that directly attributable to some of the challenges we've talked about before, or do you think there are other factors involved in that as well?
I think post-COVID, we saw, and actually this is one of the benefits of us being involved in a survey like this over a prolonged period of time. You see the patterns emerge. It's not just in a singular view in a quarter. And actually one of the things I really enjoy looking at in this is what is the patterns telling us over the last 2 years and beyond. And certainly post-COVID, there was a significant drive, particularly in this region, to see businesses grow. I think there's lots of reasons for that in terms of the investment in the region, private equity backed supply chain coming back to life again in a sense, and that drive to diversify beyond oil and gas. Because of the uncertainty there, significant drive that we've seen, and we see that across our clients who've been looking to grow internationally over the past 3 years, diversify into multiple sectors. We see oil and gas companies diversifying into nuclear, into renewables, into defence, and that's repeating itself across multiple companies now. And so we've seen that increase in the number of businesses saying, we need to grow, we need to diversify. We saw it on the impact on the exports. What we're now seeing is that's where businesses are, in a sense, putting their foot in the gas and saying, let's wait and see what's happening over the next 3 months to 12 months. And so that has dropped off. Okay,
and it was quite interesting that we noticed that although 64% of respondents had still said they were actively recruiting in this region, which wasn't too far different from historic data, but this had actually only resulted in 26% actually able to increase their headcount, which is the lowest since the start of 2022. So do you think that's because their recruitment processes weren't meeting expectations? Do you think they simply weren't getting the quality or volume of applications they wanted? Or was it because they were actually net losing staff, and the staff they were recruiting for were perhaps replacements for exiting members of the team, as opposed to actually giving them a bigger headcount? Have you any anecdotes from discussions with clients or around that?
And interestingly, the top line in terms of businesses that have seen contraction in their staff count, that has pretty much stayed stable. There's a lot of stability there.
That's right.
So despite the fact you've got over 3 years, I think with the exception of one quarter, over 3 years, more than 60% of local businesses are saying they've been looking to hire an increase. And as you said, that then translates to, at least this quarter, 26% seeing an increase in their workforce. And that is the lowest for a long time. I think, a number of factors there. I think depending on who you're looking to hire, I think from our perspective, we could hire probably junior lawyers relatively easily.
Yeah.
Getting the right level of experience that brings work with it, that brings a client base with it, etc. It's a tough, very competitive market. I think there's a lot of there's been flight from the region over the years. There's been flight into industry, and so it's getting the right level of experience into your businesses has proved challenging for sure. Okay. I think probably over the last 3 years, businesses have really sought to ramp up, and maybe they're seeing a slowdown there. I think there is also a natural slowdown just as businesses wait. I mean, we've seen significant changes politically in the last 3 months, as we've talked about. We're going to see some significant consequence of that as the budget comes around, and I think businesses are possibly hitting the foot on the gas. We see it on the investment side as well, and that comes through in a different section of the report in terms of businesses. I think it was a 50% drop in the investment in the quarter.
Let's talk a bit about that, because the previous government actually kind of made full expensing permanent. They were looking to try and actually make the incentives greater for businesses to invest in plant and machinery and equipment. But I think only 13% of businesses in this region in the latest report reported that they were going to increase or had been increasing their investment in plant machinery and equipment, which was the lowest for 4 years. It was actually 25% of companies nationally. Quite a significant difference there. So what do you think's behind that?
It's a pretty, and of all the changes that we saw, this was one of the most significant ones.
It was.
It was 27% last quarter, 13% this quarter. That's more than 50% drop off in the investment in plant and machinery. Can I tell you the answers, the reasons for that? No doubt they're myriad. I guess plant and machinery can be quite industry specific versus this kind of more professional services side, and so you are looking at industrial businesses in a sense, and the dominant sector here, there's possibly a pausing there because of the potential tax impacts that are coming around in the next quarter or so. We'll wait and see on that. I think also in a sense, the top line of businesses that are saying they're continuing to invest. This is a drop off in the businesses saying we're increasing investment.
Right. Yeah.
At the top line actually of businesses that are saying no, we're maintaining investment. that has maintained. That's been stable.
It has extremely
for a number of quarters, and that's good to see. So I guess that speaks to the resilience, something that we do talk of in our region. There is resilience. The multiple cycles over the decades has built in,
and we've had to show it over the decades.
Yes, indeed, and never less so than in a sense in these past couple of years, and in certain areas as you've talked about.
One bright point is the sort of continuing divergence in terms of export performance of this region against peers in the rest of the UK, which is still very, very strong. Although even within this version of the report, there are probably a few cautionary tales about again just that sense of wait and see, not driving forward as fast, not quite as positive as it has been. But what do you think's behind that export success story for this region, which remains clear and obvious in the data?
Yeah, I'll first of all start with the energy and oil and gas piece, because that's a dominant exporting sector. Yeah. We are a global supply chain centre of excellence in this region, have been for decades. And as I mentioned earlier, I think coming out of COVID over the past 3 years, private equity-backed companies in particular, but not just. We have many family-owned businesses in that sector who have invested, who've grown, who've diversified, etc. And there's various headlines recently that speak to big family companies that have done very well in their diversification. So I think that has driven the export base over the last multiple quarters. I think at the moment, this past quarter, we saw actually in terms of businesses that they were seeing an increase in their exports, drop from 30 to 17%. That again is quite concerning.
Very much so.
To see that, and I'm not entirely sure what the basis for that is. Again, whether it's that inbuilt kind of sense of concern and uncertainty, over the political ramifications or the financial ramifications of of policy, etc. So that's really in the quarter, that drop off. And what I'd really like to do is wait and see, well, what happens next quarter? Does it bounce back? Is this a pre-budget, sense of pause, put your foot in the ball, etc.? Or actually, are we seeing, because if the export drop off in the quarter, or certainly the reduction in those businesses that are saying yes, we see this increasing. Along with a similar reduction in the number of businesses who are saying they're investing in plant and machinery, that does not augur well for industry if those were to continue into 2 or 3 quarters. And so we need to see those bounce back post the budget, etc. I think that's important for us.
And just one last thing on we've talked about people. Of course, they're at the heart of every successful business. Are you getting a sense from discussions you're having that there's also a nervousness around some of the labour, some of the employment law changes that are being proposed by the government, which sort of shift the dial towards the employee rather than the employer, or further shift the dial, some might say? Is that something which is playing on the minds of businesses?
I'd probably say no at this point in time. I think it's maybe a bit early I think businesses are probably absorbing it. Businesses are sophisticated organisations generally, and a lot of the businesses in this region are pretty sophisticated in their approach, and so I think they on stuff like this, they'll absorb the changes in policy. The region has leaned into the whole diversity and inclusion space over the last 5 to 10 years significantly, and we've seen real change in that, and that's been reported on in various other ways. I think actually one of the ones that I've seen that it's come up a number of times is on the education side, actually, in the universities, and the government's restriction on family visas for international students is almost incomprehensible. And the impact on that
it's having a huge impact.
Absolutely. At a time when universities need support, they need the investment, they need the opportunity to bring in international students with the free revenues that brings with it. And so for government to make those changes at this point seems to lack reason.
No, we very much need a reverse of that. I mean, I think the unseen consequences of that are, our whole university infrastructure is being put under huge strain.
Yes.
I mean, previously, the ability to charge higher yielding international fees. Our universities had a great reputation, and that was able to paper over the cracks of the domestic funding model, which was creaking.
Yes.
Now those creaks and cracks are becoming much more obvious because of those restrictions, and that needs to be reversed as a matter of urgency. So
I think to your earlier point, the changes on employee regulation, etc., that are being announced more recently, I think actually lawyers are probably well positioned to make money out of that. It will certainly bring uncertainty. Businesses will have to change their policies. In terms of how they approach, particularly those new employees, they're seeing a significant increase in rights right from day one, and I think businesses will need to be prepared for that, adapt, etc.
And it was interesting, your earlier comment on that suggests that we've been perhaps quite forward thinking. So actually, maybe some of the companies here are ahead of the legislation in some degrees. They've actually gone beyond the current requirement, and actually therefore might be less affected by any changes in the future. I guess that remains to be seen. Yeah,
and I think there's a sense of trickle down for that. I don't want to use that phrase too often, but there is there's a trickle down effect of sophisticated companies demanding that their supply chain come with them on that journey in terms of empowerment, in terms of diversity, in terms of driving equity into their workforce, and I think that then drives that down into the supply chain and then into other sectors. And I think we've seen that. I think this is actually a very empowered place to live and work. And so I think, yes, we're probably well placed. At the same time, we need to look at the changes, and companies need to be aware of what's coming around and then adapt their policies suitably.
So I think just to try and pull things to a bit of a close, I think we've both agreed that the 30th of October is a pretty significant day, not just because Rangers are in town, but obviously what we hear from the Chancellor will set the tone for whether this region can get on the front foot and start to turn around some of the results that we've seen in the Q3 survey. That goes into field in early part of December.
Yes.
So we will find out in due course. Findlay, thank you. The sun is shining brightly outside.
Yes.
I'm desperately hoping that that's a metaphor for the future economy of the region.
Yeah.
There have been some bright spots of news, of course, around with the confirmation of GB Energy headquarters coming here.
Greenvolt.
With Greenvolt, a number of related stories around demonstrating that this place can be the clean energy capital of Europe. It's waiting to take on that mantle.
Yes.
But it just needs the right conditions to be in place to do that. So thank you for your thoughts. Anything in closing you'd like to?
I think if I may, and being part of the Policy Council in the Chamber and working with yourselves over the past 5 quarters on the survey and looking at different sectors, I think we can very easily focus on government policy and the potential impacts and the uncertainty it drives. On the other hand, this is a region, yes on energy, yes on oil and gas, and the ETZ, I was in with ETZ just last week and looking at their different campuses and what they're doing there, working with government, working with industry.
A unique opportunity to build.
Oh my goodness, the investment opportunities there, the grant opportunities there, the businesses that are going in there. That's exciting.
It is.
But even beyond that, from biomed, what the universities are doing, in various other sectors, their businesses there's a resilience, but there's also a desire to press forward.
Agreed.
And with the right ingredients from government in terms of taxation and incentivisation, as we've proven many times, and we started off talking about it right at the outset here, business will run fast. And I think that in this region in particular, we've proven that many, many times. And so let's hope that sun will remain high in the sky.
That's very much in our DNA here in the region, and you're right. Thank you for your time.
Real pleasure.
And for your support. So this podcast and the full survey results will be live on the Chamber website, agcc.co.uk, from Friday the 18th of October. Please select the Economic Development tab and then click Quarterly Economic Survey. Even a Luddite like me could probably find that.